Okay, this is a PowerPoint about MLA documentation, Modern Language Association. Things to remember with MLA is you need to signal in, signal out, and have a works cited. So when you're incorporating outside materials into your essay, you need to tell the reader that you're doing that by signaling into the source. You need to signal out by telling the reader where they can find whatever you're using in the original material. And then you need to have a works cited that links your in-text citations to this list of references, which in MLA is called a works cited. Signaling in, this isn't an official term. It's just what some people call this idea of introducing the source. So you're going to say, according to whoever, blah, blah, blah. Okay? You can do this implicitly. A book published in 1964 said that. So as soon as you say a book published in 1964, the reader knows that it's not you talking. And then that way you can avoid issues of plagiarism. So if you suddenly start spouting a bunch of facts in your essay, but you don't say it came from another source or where it came from, then that's going to be problematic. Here's some other examples of signals in. According to Sue Smith, a study done in 1874 found that, on the other hand, another researcher found that a signal in is those words at the beginning of the sentence that tell the reader you're taking the material from a source and that it's not you speaking. Do I have to do this every time? Yes. A smooth way to do this is to refer back to your first sentence. So if you have several sentences that are coming from an outside source, you, instead of saying John Smith said, John Smith said, John Smith said, you refer back to what, how you introduced that source originally in the first sentence. John Smith states in his book that, blah, blah, blah. He goes on to say that, da, da, da. The book's fourth chapter further illuminated the point by saying, da, da, da. So you're referring back to this person that you have already introduced. When I look at my paper now, it seems like every sentence needs to be documented. That's not good, okay? So remember that most of these papers should be your analysis. So you just want to spend a little time saying what someone else said and then do your analysis. But when you're first writing your paper, this isn't going to happen. You have to revise many times before you get to the point where it's mainly you. So you're going to have to spend time on these essays. Signaling out is whenever you stop, you tell the reader in a graceful and indirect fashion that, it's not the source anymore, now it's you. You also need to do this whenever you're going from one source to another. So if you've got, two advertisements that you're analyzing, we need to know when you're talking about one advertisement versus when you're talking about the other, and so you have to do that by signaling in and out. The signal out in MLA documentation takes one form and one form only. The one and only form a signal out takes is a parenthetical reference. That means exactly what it says. You need to insert a set of parentheses at the end of each and every sentence that comes from an outside source or that contains an idea, fact, or paraphrase from an outside source. It's completely irrelevant whether you are using quotation marks or not. If the idea comes from an outside source, with MLA it must be documented. If the idea comes from an outside source, you have to document it. If you don't have a page number and you already use the author's name in the signal going into the source, then you can't put anything at the end of the source. Okay, so if you're taking something off a web page and doesn't have any pagination, and you say, and this web page is written by Smith, Smith says on his web page, blah, 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 and there's nothing to put at the end of the sentence. In these parentheses, you need to insert the author's last name and the page number unless you use the author's last name in the signal in. The reason for all of this is that the overall purpose of documentation is to guide the reader to the source. It's to give attribution and to guide the reader to the source. The reader must be guided to the works cited. The first word of each entry in the works cited is always the author's last name. Therefore, in order to find an entry in the works cited, the writer must use the author's last name in either the signal in or the signal out, one or the other. Okay, and here's an example. I'm not going to read it, but you can see the signaling in and signaling out. This paragraph works because we can always tell which source the author is discussing, so there was multiple sources in that example. What if you don't have an author? Well, then you go with the next best thing. You look in the handbook. The thing that always comes after the author is the title. So then you need to use one or two words from the title in the text of your paper to guide the reader to your works cited. What if you don't have page numbers? If you're working with online sources, often there are no page numbers. You can use paragraph numbers if you like, however, it's not MLA documentation to do so. I, as a teacher, don't require it, but there's an example if you want to do it. Or you just leave it blank. Every paper that contains outside sources and is done in MLA style needs a works cited. This is a page that is literally titled Works Cited. Not a reference page, not a bibliography. The works cited contains only things that you actually cited and referred to by name in your paper and nothing else. And I have an example there at the bottom. What if I have a source listed in my works cited but it's not referenced in the paper? That's considered a form of plagiarism here in Writing 121 because your reader's going to think you haven't used that material in your paper and you haven't given attribution. What if you have a source in your paper that isn't in the works cited? That's also a form of plagiarism because you used a source but haven't given credit. You haven't been fair about your use. Not good. Here are the important rules for works cited. The entries in your works cited must be listed in alphabetical order. The entries must contain all the information required per MLA guidelines, see the handbook. The entries must use a hanging indent. The colored hyperlinks should be removed from the URLs. If you don't know how to remove hyperlinks from your URLs, that's where they turn blue. Go into the help function in Word. Go into the help function and type in remove hyperlinks, and you'll get information on how to do it in whatever version of Word you're using. Here's an example of a works cited. You can see that the entries are in alphabetical order. It's always the author's coming first, if there is an author. If there's not, you have to put the title first. And the publication information. And all this, the italics and that's all the proper punctuation. So you need to learn that it's in the handbook. Okay, remember that when writers get low grades, they've done research on this, and one of the problems is that the writers with getting low grades on essays didn't have an ability to perceive and articulate abstract concepts with reference to particular instances. So they weren't able to take like a theory of something and apply it to a particular case. This has a lot to do with understanding MLA. It will help you be able to do that because documentation attribution is an abstract concept, and now you want to take it and apply it to a particular instance, but there will not be an example in the handbook for every single thing you have to cite. You have to take the idea of what you're doing, which is providing the author, the title, and the publication information so that someone could find it. You need to take that idea and apply it to your different instances. So sometimes you're going to have to piece together several examples from the handbook. There won't be an exact, answer for how do I cite, my teacher's lecture that I heard in 6th grade or something. There isn't going to be a citation example exactly for that type of source. So you're going to have to be creative. And you're going to have to take the abstract concept of attribution under the MLA style, and you have to apply it to these different instances.